Namaskar and welcome to this episode of Master Builders of India. During the 18th century, India witnessed a period of sustained political turmoil. While the central authority of the Mughals was declining, a number of European trading companies were gradually assuming political character. There was a general scramble for power. As the old order was changing, the new one was taking its place. The earliest buildings of the European colonial powers in India were the residential quarters, the warehouses, barracks, arsenals, etc. And these were strategically separated from the local habitat by a fortified enclosure. Most of these buildings were constructed to serve a utilitarian purpose rather than represent any architectural style. But with the emergence of British as the dominant colonial power, their architecture came to represent their political identity. In the initial years, the British saw themselves as the successor to the Mughals and sought to represent themselves in the same manner. Just as the Mughals, the British too saw architecture as a symbol of their power, and this symbolism was more eloquent at the British capital cities. From the 1850s, the British began to move the headquarters of their provincial administrations to the nearest hill stations. The Madras government spent 6 months at Ooty. The Bengal government went to Darjeeling for 3 months. The Northwestern Province government spent 5.5 months at Nainital, and the Bombay government was 4 months at Mahabaleshwar and 4 months at Pune every year. In 1864, this practice was extended to the Supreme Government in Calcutta, and Shimla was chosen for 6 months to serve as its summer capital. In the 1870s, Shimla also served as the summer capital of the provincial government of Punjab. Chaps Lee exudes old world charm. To quote a 20th century visitor, Lady Penelope Benjamin, if Shimla is the queen of the hills, then Chaps Lee is its crown. Chaps Lee is one of the oldest manor houses in Shimla. It was built in 1835 and was soon after acquired by Lord Auckland, the then Governor General of the East India Company. It was here that the Afghan Manifesto was signed on the 1st October 1838, declaring the commencement of the First Anglo-Afghan War. It was later acquired by Maharaja Charanjit Singh of Kapurthala, who used it as his summer residence. In 1976, the grandson of the Maharaja opened Chaps Lee to the visitors. Today, Chaps Lee is a heritage hotel. It offers 6 elegantly appointed suites, a wooden stairway from the main hall leads to the upper story. The dining room with period furniture evokes the memories of the past, when the late Maharaja used to host the gourmet parties. The morning room, with its glass-panelled walls, provide a refreshing view of the valley. The gold room, the drawing room, and the card room are resplendent with heirlooms, such as Gobelin tapestries, rare textiles and cabinetry from Doge's Palace in Venice, chandeliers from Murano, blue pottery jardinières from Multan, Peshwa vases, Persian carpets, marble statuary, and a collection of Indian priceless antiques. Even before it acquired the status of the imperial summer capital, a number of buildings reflecting the British style of residential architecture came up in Shimla. Among these were Chaps Lee and Woodville. Woodville is one of the oldest and finest houses of Shimla. it remained the official summer residence of the Commander-in-Chiefs of India. After 1881, the Commander-in-Chief deserted it for Snowdon, and the Woodville House was brought by Sir James Walker. Afterwards, it was passed on to the Alliance Bank of Shimla, which used it as the manager's residence. After the bank collapsed in 1923, Maharaja Sir Bhagwat Singh Sangram of Kondal State in Kathiawar purchased it for rupees 1,20,000, and in 1931 he gifted it to his daughter, Princess Leela. Raja Rana Sir Bhagat Chand of Jubal State, the husband of the princess, demolished the old Victorian building in 1938 and constructed in its place the present magnificent summer palace at the cost of rupees 5 lakh. The new Woodville Palace was designed by the Army and Navy Stores of London. After the Raja's death, the palace was converted into a hotel by one of his grandsons and was opened for public in 1977. Woodville, now called Woodville Palace Hotel, has lovely surroundings. Its gabled roofs and turrets, set amidst the lush greens of 4 acres of deodaran pine trees. Beautiful wooded walks and well-groomed lawns are reminiscent of a large country house. As the summer capital of the colonial government, a number of buildings exuding imperial self-assurance were constructed in Shimla. During the 19th century, diversity and blending of styles was the hallmark of the English architecture, and these trends featured prominently in most of the buildings constructed in Shimla during that period. The new Gothic features can be seen in Gorton Castle, the former Imperial Civil Secretariat and now the Accountant General's Office. The Barnes Court, now the official residence of the Governor of Himachal Pradesh, has Tudor arches and spires. The unusual cast iron and steel structure of the former Railway Board building presently houses many of the central government offices. The present structure of the Ellerslie building was constructed after dismantling an old building of the same name that housed the military department of the Punjab government till 1886. It is now the seat of the Himachal Pradesh Secretariat. However, the Viceregal Lodge is the most important and the most imposing of all imperial buildings at Shimla. Standing majestically on the summit of the Observatory Hills is the Viceregal Lodge. Now known as the Rashtrapati Niwas, it is quite befittingly the only building in Shimla that occupies a hill by itself. This rambling Scottish baronial edifice bears stylistic resemblance to the English Renaissance architecture. Designed by Henry Irwin, an architect in the Public Works Department, it took about 3 years and 1.65 million rupees to complete it. It consists of a main block of 3 stories and another block called kitchen wing of 5 stories. However, 3 of the 5 stories of the kitchen wing are below the ground level of the main block and thus do not belittle it. A small tower surmounts the lodge from which the Union Jack once fluttered. This tower houses the water tanks into which the water was pumped from the main supply line of the city. After independence, the lodge remained the summer retreat of the Presidents of India. In the early 60s, the then President of India, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, a leading philosopher and a writer, and the then Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, decided to make it a scholar's den where the best of minds could find an ideal retreat. Accordingly, the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies moved into the lodge in 1965. In a magnificent coronation darbar held on 12 December 1911, George V, the visiting King of England, announced that Delhi would be the capital of India. 4 days later, he even laid the foundation stone of this new capital, even before any actual planning had been done. In 1912, a Delhi Town Planning Committee was set up under the chairmanship of Captain George Swinton. The first task before this committee was to suggest an appropriate site for the construction of the new capital. By March 1913, the committee gave its final recommendation, and it suggested a site not very far from Jantar Mantar, an observatory built by the Maharaja of Jaipur. An empire in stone was constructed on the hilly mount of Raisina. This acropolis was the place of the government in its highest expression. The focal building in this group was the palatial residence of the Viceroy of India. Designed by the eminent architect Edwin Lutyens, this building was originally scheduled to be completed in 4 years, but due to the intervention of the First World War from 1914 to 1918, the construction dragged on. It was finally completed after 17 years in 1929 at the cost of Rs 14 million. At the peak of its construction, over 20,000 labourers and 3,000 stone cutters worked incessantly to raise this building. The Rashtrapati Bhavan has been laid out in H shape, and it covers a floor area of 2 lakh square feet, bigger than the Grand Palace of Louis XIV in Versailles. The main structure is 640 feet wide and its sides are 540 feet deep. Some 700 million bricks and 3 million cubic feet of stone have gone into building this mega house of 4 floors and some 340 rooms of varying sizes. The Rashtrapati Bhavan is approached through its eastern side, where a flight of 31 imposing steps lead to a columnar portico. There are 20 stately columns, 12 in the front and 8 behind. In the middle of these columns is a pedestal, rising above a small rectangular pool. On these pedestals once stood the marble statues of King George V and the Queen Mary of England. The most majestic hall inside the Rashtrapati Bhavan is the Darbar Hall. Situated just beneath the majestic dome, it occupies the central position in the building. This hall is designed on the pattern of the Pantheon in Rome. The walls of white marble rise to a height of 42 feet, whence the dome begins to spring, 72 feet in diameter and 77.5 feet in height. Above it is the majestic dome of the Rashtrapati Bhavan, which is often described as the symbol of sovereignty. The top of the dome measures 54 meters above the forecourt. It is faced with copper plates, which has over the years acquired dark patina. On the eastern side of the Rashtrapati Bhavan is a huge rectangular courtyard measuring 1300 feet by 600 feet. In the center of this court stands a 145 feet high Jaipur column. The name of the column comes from the fact that its cost was borne by the Maharaja Savai Madho Singh of Jaipur. It is topped by a bronze lotus from which arises a 6-pointed glass star, which together weighs a little more than 5 tons. The rounded shaft is of buff-colored sandstone, wholly carved in pattern of oak leaves. It rests on 4 eagles with stretched wings. The pedestal of the column contains a diagram of New Delhi on one side, and on the other it bears an epitaph composed by Luton himself. Endow your thoughts with faith, your deeds with courage, your life with sacrifice, so all men may know the greatness of India. A prophetic message from a master builder indeed. Herbert Baker was a close associate of Edwin Lutyens. When he was assigned the task of designing a secretariat on the Raisina, he set out to create, to use his own words, a permanent record of history, learning and romance of India. His first project germinated not very far from the magnificent creation of his friend Edwin Lutyens. Separated from the Rashtrapati Bhavan by a 14 feet high iron grille is the government court comprising the twin secretariat buildings called the North Block and the South Block. Each of the 2 blocks is about the size of the British Houses of Parliament. Each block is 3 stories high and nearly a quarter of a mile long. The total length of the passages is nearly 6.5 miles. Twin arms of each block that stretch out towards the Rajpath culminate into the twin red sandstone passage mounted by the colonnade pavilions having 14 columns each. Each block is mounted by a dome which is 217 feet high from the ground, that is only 21 feet lower than the Qutub Minar. Each arched opening is bound by twin pilasters on each side, which culminate in a projecting cornice, above which beautifully sculpted elephant heads are placed. In the North Block, the dome sits on an entrance hall, while in the South Block, it surmounts the conference hall. The majestic Rajpath dissects the 2 blocks and travels down the slope of the Raisina hill, where it converts into a large plaza. It is a rectangle with elliptical ends, 26.5 acres in extent. This is Vijay Chowk, from where each year on 26 January, the processional parade to mark the anniversary of India's Republic commences its journey. This is also the venue of the beating retreat ceremony that marks the conclusion of the Republic Day festivities. 6 red sandstone obelisk fountains, 3 on either side of the Rajpath, add to the grandeur of this plaza. Each of these fountains is 240 feet in length. It consists of 2 circular sheets of water formed by an oblong on a slightly lower level. The plaza is bound by a high Sanchi-style railing with 3 stone gates on either side. Initially, the British had not envisaged any grand building to house the Imperial Legislative Council. However, by 1919, it became evident that constitutional rights cannot be taken away from the Indians, and a large legislative council was inevitable. Accordingly, on the backdrop of the Government of India Act of 1919, a large legislative council was commissioned. Its foundation stone was laid by the Duke of Connaught on 12 February 1921. It took 6 years and 8.3 million rupees to complete it and was inaugurated by the then Viceroy and the Governor-General of India, Lord Irwin, on 18th January 1927. Designed by Herbert Baker, this circular building is located towards the northeast of the Rashtrapati Bhavan and the Secretariat blocks. It is 560 feet in diameter and is spread over an area of 2 acres. The circular perimeter is 75 feet high and is divided into 3 levels: the red sandstone foundation story, a middle story grit, abound by 144 buff-colored columns, each 27 feet high, and a small attic story in plaster above the cornice. It has 12 gates, among which gate number 1 on the Sansad Marg is the main entrance. The whole architecture bears a close imprint of the Indian tradition. The use of the chhajjas and the varied forms of marble jalis are reminders of the story of the craftsmanship displayed in ancient monuments and memorials. Inside the Parliament House, there are 3 semicircular wings. All these wings are connected to a circular central hall. The central hall was originally used as the library of the erstwhile Central Legislative Assembly and the Council of States. The chamber of the Lok Sabha, or the House of the People, is semicircular in shape with a floor area of about 4,800 square feet. The chamber of the Rajya Sabha, or the Council of States, is almost on the same pattern as that of the Lok Sabha chamber but is smaller in size. The Parliament is the most manifest symbol of the world's largest democracy. Its robust architecture and grand design only adds to the high values and traditions that this institution upholds. By the very nature of things, the Parliament House estate, in particular, and the chambers of the 2 houses are subject to strict security precautions throughout the year. Originally called as the All India War Memorial Arch, this 160 feet high gigantic structure of Imperial Delhi was erected as a solemn homage to 60,000 Indian soldiers who had died fighting for the British on the northwestern frontier and in the Third Anglo-Afghan War of 1919. This impressive memorial was designed by Edwin Lutyens. Its foundation stone was laid in February 1921 by the Duke of Connaught, and it took 10 years to complete it. Its main opening is in the form of arches set in east-west direction. These arches are 138 feet high and 30 feet wide. The inner height is 87.5 feet and the breadth is 70 feet. On the sides, in the north-south direction, are 2 smaller arched openings, each 54 feet high. These contain giant pine cones placed in urns above the doorways at the bottom. The whole structure is made of buff-colored sandstone standing on a comparatively low base of red sandstone. As the arch rises from its base to the colossal solid cornice, horizontally projecting lines and vertical recesses break the immense verticality of the structure. Above the cornice is an attic story, ascending centrally and mounted by a circular stone bowl that is 11.5 feet in diameter. On either side of the topmost step, the word India is inscribed on a stone tablet placed in between 2 circular medallions, which gives it the popular name, the India Gate. Standing some 500 feet east of the India Gate, this vacant canopy once displayed a white marble statue of King George V. Once stood on a high white marble pedestal. Designed by Edwin Lutyens, this 73 feet high monument rises on a square base. On this base are 4 columns, supporting the graceful sandstone arches. Above it is a projecting cornice and a small dome, complete with stone finials. The whole structure is raised in a circular basin situated in the center of a square pool. This monument marked the conclusion of the stately Kingsway, now called Rajpath, that originates from the Viceroy's house, 2 kilometers to the west. Viewed through the India Gate, this canopy appears encased in a huge frame. The buildings of the British Raj added a new term to the architectural vocabulary. It was ceremonial or processional architecture. As for the new capital itself, the name New Delhi did not come into vogue till 1926. In fact, the Imperial Delhi Municipal Committee had forwarded 3 names to the British government in London. These were Raisina, New Delhi and Delhi South, of which New Delhi was approved personally by the King Emperor. The new capital was formally inaugurated on 3rd February 1931. Though the foundations of these imperial buildings were firm, the empire itself was fast losing ground. On 15th August 1947, India became an independent nation. The challenges before this country, which was impoverished by colonial rule, were numerous. The biggest of all was that of building infrastructure for economic development, for social welfare, and for governance. The post-independent architecture played a decisive role in meeting these challenges. The story of how modern ideas and young dreams of our master builders gave concrete shape to ambitious projects of post-independent India we leave to some other time. Meanwhile, the architectural past of India lives on, rubbing its shoulders with modern buildings of our times. Every building is part of a jigsaw of our nation and thus has a definite societal role to play. Until we meet again, it's goodbye and Jai Hind.